All right, hi everybody. So, just want to give you guys a really quick overview of Weber's concept of ideal types. So, this is going to become particularly important when we talk about bureaucracies, which is the next lecture after this. But this goes beyond bureaucracies as well. This is an idea that Weber used a lot, and actually people still use it. So, it's just worth knowing. You're going to run into this idea of ideal types quite a bit. So, ideal types types do something. They describe that which is essential to a group or phenomenon. That is not the easiest, most straightforward definition you could imagine. But essentially, if we think about some of the examples I put down at the bottom of the slide here, so we can think about ideal type Protestants, ideal type capitalists, ideal type bureaucracies, Americans, football fans, joggers, whatever. We're thinking about the most perfect version of that thing, the most ideal version of that thing. When I say perfect or ideal, though, I don't mean in terms of it being good. So if I'm saying the ideal football fan or the ideal football player, I'm not saying the best football fan or the best football player. I'm thinking in terms of what is essential to being a football player, what is essential to being a Protestant. So an ideal type football fan, not football fan, rather, an ideal type football player, for instance, would be very big, in really good shape, really strong, really tall, really fast. If you saw a scrawny, tiny football player, you wouldn't associate that kind of body type with a football player. So these are analytical constructs that allow us to, sorry, I missed a word here. So analytical constructs against which real life cases can be compared. So there should be the word which right here. So it should read again, analytical constructs against which real life cases can be compared. So let's take this idea and let's this abstract concept of ideal type, and let's apply it to a particular case, and then we can see how ideal types are these analytical constructs that allow us to compare to real life cases. So during our conversation about the Protestant ethic and the spirit of capitalism, we talked in terms of ideal types. I didn't necessarily make that clear throughout the entire lecture or even mention it, but we were talking in terms of ideal types. So we actually talk in terms of ideal types all the time. So we talked about the Lutherans. And so when I was discussing the Lutherans within the context of Weber's Protestant ethic, I talked about these basic features that Lutherans had. And these are the basic features that Weber was concerned about. It's not like this is the only thing that's relevant about Lutherans, but it's the only thing that's relevant for Weber's argument. So these early Lutherans were people who reject the monastic life as useless. So they saw people like nuns and monks and priests as essentially useless. They weren't glorifying God. They were isolated somewhere in some monastery or convent or whatever, not working in the world, not working to build God's kingdom on earth. So the Lutherans saw that kind of life as useless. The Lutherans accept that he or she has a calling and then submits to that task or job. So an ideal type Lutheran who is called to be a janitor by God will accept the fact that he or she is called to be a janitor and will work as hard as possible to be the best possible janitor imaginable. And this Lutheran is going to reject worldly pleasures, but is active in the world. So this point about being active in the world gets at this idea that they're going to continue to work in the world. They're not going to withdraw to some monastery or convent, or as some ascetics do in other religions, like the Buddha or something, go live in the woods for a while and commune with nature or something. But at the same time, the Lutherans are going to reject worldly pleasures. And what that means, they're not going to be drinking, they're not going to be partying, they're not going to be dancing, they're not going to be singing, unless they're singing about God. They are giving up earthly enjoyment in order to focus on the spiritual, or to focus on the godly. Now, does this mean every single Lutheran that has ever lived, or every single Lutheran that was one of these early Lutherans? Because Weber's really focused on the early Lutherans. He's not focused on contemporary Lutherans. But early Lutherans, were they all like this? Well, no. I'm sure quite a few of them couldn't have cared less about priests or nuns. I'm sure quite a few of them who were called to do menial tasks like working as a janitor or whatever rejected that absolutely and went out there and didn't stick to their tasks and submit to it, try to get other jobs. I'm sure that there were plenty of people out there who worked in their calling but didn't work particularly hard, and there were probably quite a few Lutherans who did not reject worldly pleasures, or at least didn't reject them as much as other Lutherans did. But the key point of having this idea of the ideal type Lutheran is that having this ideal type gives us something to talk about. We can't have a conversation about Lutherans if we're thinking about every particular Lutheran ever. We need to think about broadly what we mean by a Lutheran, and broadly what we mean by that is, well, somebody who accepts the teachings of Martin Luther, rejects the monastic life as useless, accepts that he or she has a calling, and then submits to the task, and rejects worldly pleasures. Did all of them look like that? No. There may not have been any that were perfect examples of this type, but still, this still gives us the capacity to think about Lutherans and what they are. And this brings us back to the previous slide, where we're thinking about ideal types as analytical constructs. So what that means is we construct these ideas, these ideals, in order to be clear about what it is that we're talking about, and it also allows us to see the degree to which people in the real world actually match up to the ideal type that we have constructed. Okay? So again, this probably seems a bit random, but it is going to matter quite a bit when we talk about bureaucracies and bureaucratic systems. Okay, thanks.